Hello and welcome back. Once again, my name is Avery Clark, and today I'll be going over MIS Assignment 8. In this assignment, we create web pages for our Shopify and Coog Hotel systems um, using Visual Studios. I'll try to keep this video under 20 minutes. We'll see if it happens. So this is the design page for our Shopify system. We'll start with Shopify. Um, so we've got a bunch of these ADO.NET objects, the main one being this multi-view. So each one of these views within the multi-view is sort of its own panel in the web page. You can tab between them using these link buttons. Um, and then obviously this is to add products. Um, yeah, we have a bunch of different objects for how you can interact with the web page. The more interesting thing is how these objects work, which is in this .vb. I have my code designated into regions like navigation, retrieve dimension data, just makes it easier to keep track of. So if we look at that navigation, this is how you toggle between the pages on the multi-view. So we're basically saying when you click button 1, you go to multi-view index 0 because everything indexes from 0 onwards. So link 1 correlates to index 0. And this is a do as I say, not as I do moment, because this is the one of the only instances where I didn't name my object something helpful. What you're supposed to do is, I hope I did this right. Yes, see, you name the add new product button add new product, so you can know immediately what to call it when you're referencing it in your code. Because if I had to come up with, while I was coding, what the management reporting button was, if I wanted to call on it or write some code about it, I would have to go back here and click on it and see that it's link button 5, and that takes time. So do as I say, not as I do, or do as I do most of the time because I did it how you should, I hope, the rest of the time. And then we have retrieving dimension data, which is for these tables down here, products, categories, etc. The idea is you click this button and the data from your SQL Server is going to populate in there. And so I put that in a region called retrieve dimension data. And so the first one is to get the customer's data. Again, didn't name the button very well, but when you click button 2, you're going to create, the dim is to like create a new, or yeah, I can't think of a better word for that, but we're creating a new command, a new SQL command to run a SQL stored procedure. And we're going to call it get customers command because we're naming that correctly. It should all be named, similar things, get customers command to run the get customers, SQL procedure. So basically we're saying what the customers command does is that it runs this specific procedure. So this is the name of the stored procedure. So we will, the connection between the, using the connection between SQL and Visual Studios, we will go check my SQL database and we will grab this table. Sorry, this stored procedure will be executed. It's not a table. All right. And then it runs within this try catch block, which if anything, if there's any exceptions, like if anything breaks down in here within the try catch block, response.write just means it'll spit it out and it'll say, here's what went wrong, fix this line of code. Very helpful when you're messing things up, you don't know why. But within, we're just saying if the connection state between SQL and Visual Studios is closed, then open it so we can get that data between them. And then this is the table that we created, the data table, but it's not actually it is not the same as the table that displays the data because that is a grid view. The data tables are sort of invisible. It's just the memory that holds the data. So you get the data from SQL, you put it into a data table, but the data table isn't like a physical object. The object that it corresponds to is a grid view. Sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So we clear the rows in that data table. So the data table is empty. And then we use a data adapter to a SQL data adapter specifically to run the get customers command. So the data adapter is what you actually need to grab the data from SQL and fill it into the customer's data table. And then we have to get that invisible data from the customer's data table into a physical form, which in this case is the grid view, which I've named grid view customers.data source. So these are the actual physical tables that you see in the design tab over here. And then we basically just insert the data in there. And then again, like I said, any exceptions, anything goes wrong should be spelled out for us down there. And then to save time, I will tell you it's practically the same for the other dimension tables. I'm going to try to keep this video under 30 minutes. And then we made these 3 group by reports. And so we have code for those as well. They're each in their own region. So let's look at frequent flyer report, which is for anyone with, I believe it's 3 or more purchases of the same item. It's a good thing to know if you're running a business. So again, this is saying that when that button 5, is clicked, this is what's going to run. We're going to clear the rows in our data table, which again is sort of the invisible thing that holds all the data. The grid view being the not physical, but visual object that displays it. And then we're going to create this SQL command. We're going to call it command frequent flyer report to make it easy. And when that runs, we are going to run a stored procedure. And that stored procedure is specifically called generate frequent flyer report within my SQL database. And then again, that data adapter to actually transport the data from SQL to Visual Studios. And we're going to use it to run that command. And it's going to fill into the analysis 6 table, which then, because the data table is invisible, going to be stuck into a grid view, which is this grid view right here, which is the object. And that's about it. Pretty, I don't know if it's straightforward, but I guess maybe simple, but not straightforward. And then there we go. Okay, cool. Okay, and then we have a third main activity done by this web page, which is to add insert rows of data. And we have that for customers, and we have it for products, I believe. Let's look at products because there's a little more going on there. Okay. So this runs when the add new product button is clicked, which is this button right here. But this one requires some inputs. And so we have error checking based on the inputs that people put in into these objects right here, product name, category, etc. We are saying if the cost input is nothing, like if they just don't put it in, then we say check data entry. Similarly, if they don't put anything in the text box or the quantity box, or if in the cost text it is not numeric, as it should be numeric, then we'll say check data entry. Same with star quantity. And then we have the radial button lists, which are these objects here, which allow you must select one, but you can only select one of the options. And they're automatically indexed to -1. So that's why it says if the index is -1, then write check data entry. Because if it is -1, that means you haven't clicked one. Because it starts, like I mentioned earlier, I believe I mentioned it earlier, the indexes all start from -1. And then it goes 0, 1, 2, 3 for all the objects, including like the grid view or the views in the multi-view. Okay. And then if there's any issues, you exit the sub, stop the procedure. And then just like before, we have to make the command that runs the stored procedure. So dim, just say we're creating a command. And then we're defining it as a SQL command. And we're calling it add new product to keep things easy. And this is the specific name of the SQL stored procedure so that it knows what to run. And here we've got the parameters. Same as in SQL. If you got a stored procedure, you got to put stuff into it. Or you don't have to, but because the SQL stored procedure has parameters, like input variables, we also have to put those in Visual Studio. So we have product name, category ID, stock quantity, cost, preferred vendor ID, and we're just saying which object is which input. So we're basically saying product name is whatever they put in here into the text box because we're putting them with each other. And then open the connection. And then we are writing the feedback part of the stored procedure, which is new to the stored procedure. I haven't added it yet, so this doesn't run anything in my version, but it doesn't get in the way either, so that's fine. And then inside that try catch block, if something goes wrong, we're going to write what it is. And yeah, the add new customer is basically the same, if anything, a little bit easier because the customer inputs, I believe, are only text boxes. Yeah, there's no radio button lists or anything like that. That makes it quite easy. All right, and now we're going to show this web page in action. We can view it in the browser. And we can look here, we can look at those grid views that are displaying our data, customers, yada, yada, yada. And if we want to try inputting a new customer, let's go Liam Johnson. I'm very creative with these names. Liam Johnson. And he was born. I guess he's 11. Great. 123 West Drive, Tacoma, Washington. And let's add him. There we go. Liam Johnson, Tacoma, Washington. No purchase history or anything yet, but one day he will have it. Okay, and then the last thing was that management reporting. And we can see these here. These are just, those group by SQL queries, stored procedures, just retrieving that data, but instead of just pulling it in, like we're just pulling it into to the products or categories or customers tables, we are pulling it in and then grouping it by something, like grouping it by customer or by product. Frequent flyer report shows which customers are buying which things repeatedly. This customer has brought lint rollers 3 unique times, 4 total units. You must have a lot of dogs or cats or something. But yeah, let's move on to the Coog Hotel system. Looks quite familiar from the design stage. Lots of those objects. We have the link buttons again to toggle between parts of the multi-view. And then we have some grid views and some objects for input like text box. I named these ones better. TXT description for the text box, add new service, button add new service, just to keep it easy when you're writing the code out. And let's see, the navigation, I'm trying to keep this video relatively short and sweet to not waste so much of your time. So the navigation is just about the same. It's just toggling between the different views. The multi-view and retrieving the dimension data is just about the same as well. So when we click that button, we're utilizing this command that we're creating right here. And we're describing what it does is it runs a stored procedure, that specific stored procedure being get guests to retrieve the guest data. And then we're opening the connection state if it is closed. And we're clearing out that data table using the data adapter to run the command and fill the data table, which is of course invisible, but we're making it visible by then filling this grid view, which is this object here, filling it with the data that we've taken from SQL, brought it into Visual Studios, and we're filling that grid view. And of course, try catch block. If anything goes wrong in here, response.write, it should spit it out and say, this line, this is your problem, such and such didn't happen. And again, same for rooms, same for room types, etc. And then we're also inserting data. We'll look at this add new extra service. Yep, it's just about the same. Here's our error checking, same as before. So when we click that button, here are the things that run. If that input for the service name is nothing, or the description is nothing, or the price is nothing, or they put nothing in the service hours box, then we say check data entry just to ensure that no one's leaving anything blank. Even if they did, I don't believe the stored procedures would run because the stored procedure requires those. I don't think they're allowed to be null, but that'll give you the helpful hint to check data entry. And then we're making that command that runs a stored procedure. We're calling it add extra service. Very straightforward. It is a SQL command. And what it does is it runs a stored procedure, that specific stored procedure being add extra service. That's sort of the naming convention that I didn't do so great on the last web page, but better here. Everything is just called add extra service. So if you don't know, when you're writing your code, you can just assume the stored procedure is called that. The command is probably called add extra service. The data adapter maybe, the grid view. And these are the parameters, just like before. Service name, description, price, service hours. And these are the objects that they relate to. Down here, there we go. So the inputs into these boxes, these text boxes, come the parameters in here. And then we have this try catch block. And this is to write, this is to write that text output. My stored procedures do not have that. I think Featherman changed that after creating the stored procedures. It might be helpful, so I may go back and add that and then uncomment out this code so that that will run. But yes, very similar to the Shopify system with the adding of new lines or new rows, I should say, into the data. And then we also have those management reports. Which one's interesting? We'll look at room type. So this is going to group that data by room type. So we can know which room types sell the most or the most popular, et cetera, which ones have the longest stays on average. So we're going to grab that. What am I saying? Sorry. This happens. It's late. So if I'm a bit frazzled, I apologize. When the button room type report is clicked, which is of course this button down here with the ID button room type report. When it is clicked, we're going to, first of all, clear that data table so we can fill it with new data and ensure that it's empty. And we're creating this command, the room type report command, that's going to run a SQL procedure. And when we run it, like I said, it's going to run a SQL procedure, specifically the generate room type report procedure. And then we're going to use that data adapter to run that command. And the data adapter fills the data table with the data retrieved from the SQL database by the command. And we're going to fill that grid view because obviously the data table is not visible. It doesn't display the data, it just holds it in the memory of the system. So we're displaying it in this room type report grid view, just displaying the data caught here by the data adapter running this command. And that's it. And we end the region. The regions are very handy because this is 340 lines of code, but you don't have to scroll all the way down to get to it. Let's see. And then let's view it in browser. My roommate's watching some football, so hopefully that audio is not coming through. Look at the guest list. Boom. Rooms. Boom. Here we've got our room types. We've got our extra services. And let's add one just for the sake of showing how this works. Now I got to come up with something. What's an extra service? Do I have personal training? I have personal training. Museum tour. We're going to assume we're right by a museum. The description, tour of the museum. And it's only $35. And it runs 12 a.m. to 5 p.m. And there we go. Tour of the museum. And it's automatically set to be available. And what haven't we done? We haven't looked at the reports yet. Here's our room type report. So we've only ever sold rooms of room type 1 or room type 2. Room type 1 is more popular. It has generated more total revenue, which is just the sum of all the subtotals, I believe, from the orders or the stays, I should say. And then we have their average stay length, which is just the sum divided by the number of times they've stayed. Or I believe actually there's an averaging function in SQL that I used. Extra service report, for each extra service, number of times purchased, number of times sold. Sorry, total units sold, number of times purchased, in that you can purchase 2 massages in one sale. The total revenue. And then repeat customers report. We've only had 1 repeat customer. Our hotel is very new, so our data set is limited. All right. And then let's look really quick at these SQL stored procedures, just for the sake of covering all my bases and showing everything related to this homework. We'll do a real quick look at these stored procedures. We will look at, let's just look at the room type report as an example. Okay, here we go, called generate room type report. We're grabbing this data from the reservations table. We're grabbing the room type ID, the number of reservation IDs, as the number of stays. So that's what this column will be called, or titled at the top. And we're summing the number of room fees as total revenue from rooms. We're averaging the number of stays as average stay length. And again, from the reservations table, and we're grouping by room type ID. So it's, we're counting the number of reservation IDs per room type ID, etc. At this point, we're fairly comfortable with SQL. And if we, just for the sake, show what that looks like, boom, looks exactly like what happened, or sorry, what we pulled into Visual Studios and that web page. So yeah, that is homework 8. I hope this video was concise. We'll see when I check how long it is. Thanks so much for your time.